Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and turning on the faucet, only to hear silence.
No running water?
No warning.
No explanation.
At first, you assume it's a temporary outage.
Maybe a broken pipe.
Maybe maintenance. But hours pass. Then days. Supermarket shelves empty as people rush to buy bottled water.
Hospitals begin rationing supplies.
Farmers watch their crops wither under a relentless sun.
Factories slow down, then stop entirely.
Suddenly, every part of daily life begins to unravel because of one simple fact: there is no water. For millions of people, this isn't a fictional disaster. It's already reality. There is a country where water has become one of the most valuable resources on Earth. Rivers are shrinking. Underground reservoirs are disappearing faster than they can refill. Entire communities depend on water trucks to survive, while cities face the constant threat of running dry. Scientists have warned about the crisis for years, but the problem keeps getting worse. That country is Mexico. When most people think of Mexico, they imagine beautiful beaches, ancient pyramids, colorful festivals, and vibrant cities. But behind those images lies one of the most severe water crises in the Western Hemisphere. It's a crisis that has been building for decades, fueled by population growth, climate change, poor infrastructure, pollution, and decades of unsustainable water management. The frightening part is that this crisis didn't happen overnight. It developed slowly, almost invisibly, until millions of people suddenly found themselves living with permanent water shortages. To understand why, we first need to understand Mexico's geography. At first glance, Mexico appears to have plenty of water. The country is crossed by major rivers, surrounded by two oceans, and receives seasonal rainfall. But water is distributed very unevenly. The southern part of Mexico receives abundant rainfall throughout the year. Tropical forests and powerful rivers dominate the landscape. Yet most of the country's population and economic activity are concentrated in the central and northern regions, where rainfall is far less reliable and droughts are becoming increasingly common. This creates a dangerous imbalance. Most of the water exists where relatively few people live, while most people live where water is becoming scarce. Nowhere is this more obvious than in Mexico City. Built on the site of the ancient Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan, Mexico City sits more than 2,000 meters above sea level in a large mountain basin. Ironically, the city was originally surrounded by lakes. Centuries ago, Spanish colonists began draining those lakes to prevent flooding and create more land for expansion. What seemed like a practical solution hundreds of years ago created problems that still haunt the city today. Without the natural lakes to store water, Mexico City became increasingly dependent on underground aquifers. Year after year, enormous amounts of groundwater have been pumped out to satisfy the needs of more than 20 million people living in the metropolitan area. The problem is simple. Nature cannot replace the water as quickly as it is being removed. As underground water disappears, the ground itself begins to collapse. In some neighborhoods, buildings tilt at strange angles. Roads crack apart. Water pipes break repeatedly as the land slowly sinks beneath them. In certain parts of the city, the ground has sunk by several meters over the last century.
Every broken pipe means even more water is lost before it ever reaches homes. Ironically, while millions struggle to access clean water, an astonishing percentage of treated water never reaches consumers at all. Aging infrastructure leaks enormous quantities every single day. In some cities, nearly half of all drinking water is lost through damaged pipes before anyone can use it. Imagine carrying buckets of water every morning while thousands of liters disappear underground simply because the system is falling apart. But infrastructure is only one piece of the puzzle. Agriculture consumes the vast majority of Mexico's freshwater resources. Large farms grow crops that require enormous amounts of irrigation, especially in dry northern states. Some of these crops are exported around the world, effectively exporting precious fresh water hidden inside agricultural products. At the same time, rapid industrial development has increased demand even further. Manufacturing plants, mining operations, and expanding cities all compete for the same limited resource. Then comes climate change. Over the past several decades, droughts across northern and central Mexico have become longer and more intense. Higher temperatures increase evaporation from reservoirs and soil. Rainfall has become less predictable. In many regions, reservoirs that once supplied millions of people now sit at historically low levels. Entire farming communities have watched harvests fail year after year. For many families, the only option has been to leave their homes and search for work elsewhere. Water scarcity is slowly becoming one of the hidden drivers of migration. And the future may become even more challenging. The warning signs are already impossible to ignore. In recent years, some of Mexico's largest reservoirs have fallen to alarmingly low levels. Satellite images have revealed shrinking lakes, drying riverbeds, and vast stretches of cracked earth where water once stood. During particularly severe droughts, authorities have been forced to introduce water rationing across entire neighborhoods. For many families, running water is no longer something they can take for granted. In some communities, taps work for only a few hours each week. Residents rush to fill every bucket, bathtub, and container they own before the supply is shut off again. Once the water stops, they have no idea when it will return. Across many cities, another system has quietly become part of everyday life. Large water trucks, known locally as pipas, travel through neighborhoods delivering water directly to homes and apartment buildings. Families often wait for hours, hoping a truck will arrive before their storage tanks run empty. If demand is high or supplies are limited, some households simply go without. The result is a strange inequality. People with enough money can purchase additional water deliveries whenever shortages occur. Poorer families often cannot afford the extra cost. They may spend hours collecting water from public distribution points or rely on unsafe sources that increase the risk of disease. In other words, access to clean water is becoming increasingly tied to income. But households are not the only ones competing for this limited resource. Mexico has become one of the world's largest manufacturing centers. Thousands of factories produce automobiles, electronics, steel, food products, and countless other goods destined for international markets. These industries require enormous volumes of water every single day. Mining operations also consume vast quantities of groundwater, particularly in the country's dry northern regions. Extracting valuable minerals often requires pumping water from underground aquifers that local communities also depend on for drinking and agriculture. As populations grow and industries expand,
competition for every remaining drop becomes even more intense. Another controversial issue involves bottled water. Mexico has one of the highest rates of bottled water consumption in the world. In many places, people simply do not trust the quality or reliability of tap water. As a result, millions of households regularly purchase bottled water for drinking. This has created a massive industry worth billions of dollars. At the same time, critics argue that heavy groundwater extraction by some beverage companies has intensified local shortages in certain areas. These debates have become increasingly heated as communities question who should have priority when water becomes scarce. Should limited water supplies go to local residents? Or should they support industries that provide jobs and economic growth? There are no easy answers. Pollution makes the situation even worse. Many rivers and lakes have become contaminated by untreated sewage, industrial waste, and agricultural runoff. Even when water exists, it is not always safe to drink without expensive treatment. This means the country faces two separate problems at once. There is not enough water, and some of the water that remains cannot safely be used. Meanwhile, underground aquifers continue to decline. Scientists describe many of these aquifers as being in water deficit. Every year, more water is pumped out than nature can replace through rainfall. This process cannot continue forever. Think of it like withdrawing money from a bank account without ever making deposits. At first, nothing seems wrong. But eventually, the balance reaches zero. Nature follows the same principle. Perhaps the most alarming example of this crisis can be seen in Monterrey, one of Mexico's largest industrial cities. Just a few years ago, residents experienced severe shortages as reservoirs dropped to critically low levels. Long lines formed wherever water was available. Some neighborhoods received water for only a few hours each day. Businesses struggled to operate, while schools and hospitals implemented emergency conservation measures. For many people, it was the first real glimpse of what a future defined by water scarcity could look like. Yet experts warn that Monterrey is not unique. Without major reforms, similar crises could affect other cities across the country. And Mexico is far from alone. Around the world, countries from South Africa to Iran, from India to parts of the United States, are facing growing pressure on their freshwater supplies. Climate change, population growth, pollution, and aging infrastructure are creating a global challenge that extends far beyond national borders. Mexico simply offers one of the clearest examples of what happens when multiple problems collide at the same time. The question is no longer whether water scarcity will affect modern societies. The question is how prepared those societies will be when it does. Despite the scale of the crisis, Mexico is not standing still. Across the country, engineers, scientists, and local governments are working to slow the decline. New reservoirs are being built. Water recycling projects are expanding. Cities are replacing old pipelines to reduce leaks. Farmers are gradually adopting more efficient irrigation systems that use significantly less water than traditional methods. Some regions have also invested in rainwater harvesting, allowing homes, schools, and businesses to capture seasonal rainfall instead of letting it flow away. These efforts are making a difference. But many experts believe they are not happening fast enough. The biggest challenge is that solving a water crisis is far more complicated than simply finding more water. Every decision affects someone else. If more water is sent to growing cities,
farmers may lose access to irrigation. If agriculture receives priority, urban populations may face stricter rationing. Restricting industrial water use could protect reservoirs, but it could also threaten jobs and economic growth. There is no single solution that satisfies everyone. Climate change adds another layer of uncertainty. Scientists expect many parts of northern and central Mexico to experience hotter temperatures and more frequent droughts during the coming decades. Higher temperatures increase evaporation, meaning reservoirs lose water faster, while crops require even more irrigation. In other words, demand is rising just as supply becomes less reliable. This forces governments to make increasingly difficult decisions. Where should the remaining water go? Who should receive it first? And how much can nature continue to provide before the system reaches its limits? These questions are no longer theoretical. They are already shaping the future of millions of people. Perhaps the most important lesson from Mexico's water crisis is that disasters are rarely caused by a single event. There wasn't one catastrophic day when the country suddenly ran out of water. Instead, countless small decisions accumulated over decades. Cities expanded faster than infrastructure could keep up. Groundwater was pumped faster than it could naturally recharge. Lakes disappeared. Pipelines aged. Pollution increased. Temperatures rose. Rainfall became less predictable. Each problem seemed manageable on its own. Together, they created one of the most serious water challenges in the modern world. Water is easy to ignore because it is usually invisible in our daily lives. It flows when we turn a tap. It fills our glass. It irrigates fields. It cools factories. It generates electricity. Most of us never stop to think about where it comes from or what happens if it stops coming. But civilizations have always depended on reliable water supplies. History is filled with powerful societies that declined after droughts, environmental degradation, or poor resource management weakened their foundations. Modern technology gives us far more tools than ancient civilizations ever had, but it cannot create unlimited fresh water. That is why many experts now describe water as one of the defining strategic resources of the 21st century. In the future, access to clean water may influence economies, migration, agriculture, energy production, and even international relations more than many people realize today. Mexico's story is not simply about one country struggling with drought. It is a warning. A warning that even large, modern nations can find themselves vulnerable when population growth, climate pressures, aging infrastructure, and decades of unsustainable management collide. The faucet does not suddenly run dry overnight. It happens one decision at a time. One drought at a time. One leaking pipe at a time. One depleted aquifer at a time. And by the time everyone notices, reversing the damage becomes far more difficult than preventing it in the first place. The real question isn't whether Mexico can solve its water crisis. The real question is whether the rest of the world will learn from it before facing the same reality. If you enjoyed this documentary and want to explore the hidden realities shaping our world, subscribe to Dark Atlas. Every week, we uncover the stories behind collapsing nations, geopolitical conflicts, forgotten places, and global crises that rarely make the headlines. Because sometimes the darkest secrets on Earth aren't hidden underground, they're hiding in plain sight.